My name is Swatosh, and what I've been working on since the beginning of the year is a chamber opera based on the myth of Daedalus and Icarus, and then my librettist their name is Brian Dang, and they're Brian Dang. Let me share this. So my chamber opera is entitled If Only I Could Give You the Sun, and it's based on the myth of Icarus and Daedalus. So the synopsis of the opera. So in a trans reimagining of the original myth, Icarus finds themselves trapped in a never-ending maze that beckons them to submit to the societal expectations of both the myth they're known for and of the expectations of their body. They're accompanied by Daedalus, who shifts in and out as she struggles to figure out what Icarus wants for themselves. Finally, with acceptance and the willingness to take the risk of flying, they build Icarus's wings together. Doubts threaten to drown Icarus, but eventually Icarus flies and escapes the rigid maze and claims agency over their body. The synopsis was written by the librettist Brian Dang. So the characters we have are Icarus, they, them, and which is written to be performed either by a lyric baritone or a lyric mezzo. This role is designed to be for someone who is transgender or non-binary, and to be performed by someone regardless of their birth assigned gender. And we have Daedalus, she, her, who is played by a lyric soprano. And then all the other instrumentalists function as the maze. The maze functions similarly to a Greek chorus that's found in Greek theater, and they kind of act as narrators between the different arias. The instrumentation for this piece is bass clarinet / clarinet, effects electronics, which is a lot of processed voices that I've turned into an Aerotoric backdrop for when the maze is speaking, and then piano / keyboard, 4 1/3 octave marimba, and cello. So overall, the structure of this piece was actually highly inspired by A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and how the main character is visited by 3 characters that represent different aspects of their life. In our interpretation of the myth, we chose to focus on 3 different types of relationships: friends, parents, and lovers. And each of these different relationships are represented with their own aria. Then in between these different sections, the maze delivers a recitative using sprechstimme and functions like a Greek chorus / narrators. One of the things we did is at the end of the opera, we subverted the original ending of the myth of Icarus flying up, getting too close to the sun and his wings melting, because we wanted it to be the story of about self-acceptance and like having everything and finally finding the sun. So the first excerpt that I'm going to show is from the opening scene, in which which is the audience is introduced to Icarus as they have just entered the maze. Within this scene, you really get it. You also get a sense of like the musical language that I operate the maze in, and then this scene is kind of an interesting mix of some sections aria, and then there's some very recitative like moments. One of the characteristic things that I did is that within the cello functions at this steady bass line, kind of as representative of this idea of being like strung along and like beginning to face their fears surrounding their identity. Are people hearing anything?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? I forgot to share sound, I think. Here we go. There we go. The next excerpt I'm going to be sharing is the second of those three arias I talked about, which is entitled I Am Your Parent Who. This aria was influenced by the music of composer Joe Hisaishi and the concept of 2-5-1 turnarounds. Within this aria, all of the modulations between the key centers were either by chromatic mediant or use of what's known as backdoor 2-5s, which is 4 minor 7 to flat 7 to 1, as a way of modulating in a way that's more unexpected. In the middle of this song, I take the moment to musically foreshadow like the end of the closing aria. And at the very end of the aria, at the end of the parent aria, the friend aria, and the lover aria, you get this phrase, if only I could give you the sun this very instant, then you get the sense of that motive. One of the things in the development of this particular aria was that in getting feedback from my friend Carolyn Clegg, she helped me be more nuanced and actually take into account the actual rhythm of the language when I was modifying my prosody. On this movement, this is one of the movements where I opted to use the keyboard, and I used the sound, which was the Spitfire Last soft piano. And one of the things that I liked about that particular sound sample was that it was the sound of a piano, but it sounded like there was felt between the strings and the hammers. Before I move on to talking about the electronics and how I use that, does anyone have any questions?
I assume for the most part you had the libretto, the text first in hand, and then you set the music to it? Or did you have any, just curious if you had any musical ideas ahead of time?
I did have some, let's see. One of the big ideas I had ahead of time was the use of the electronics, and like to create like this kind of create a chorus part, because one of the restrictions that I was given as part of this process with the Seattle Opera Creation Lab was that I could write for up to 6 instrumentalists, but only four singers or four instrumentalists, with a total of 6 musicians. So it was my way of adding more singers to the mix.
It looks like a neat instrumentation for sure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun because I hadn't really written for marimba or bass clarinet before. Okay, so
Drew, I'd like to comment. I like the way your text is set and the music, how it works together, and it's very nice.
mm-hmm. Yeah, so in this process, at the beginning of January, Brian and I met with people at the Seattle Opera, and then our librettist mentor Jerry Dye, and our composition mentor Kamala Sankaram, and then we went on when me and Brian met ourselves, and we arrived at this idea of kind of reinterpreting the myth of Icarus and Daedalus. Kind of one of the things that I liked about that idea was that, you see operas about like Greek myths all the time, but I hadn't actually really heard of someone adapting this particular myth to an opera before. And then, so with the electronics part, I use this as a backdrop for these moments where the maze is speaking. And what I did is I did Aerotoric speaking and singing, which was highly inspired by another one of my pieces, which is my 4th movement of a secular requiem, where I played around with Aerotoric speaking and did this thing where it's like, okay, you start with breathing and then you go into speaking, and then you go into singing, because the title was called A Lesson in Forgetting. So it was this idea of conceptually moving from forgetting to remembering. And then that movement was inspired by the piece Lux Eterna by Ligeti and O God Thy Sea by Sarah Rimkus. To create all of the electronics parts, I used Logic Pro X, and then the instrumentalists or the vocalists for the electronics part included myself, my friend Carolyn Quick, and then my mom, Terry Swatosh. What I would to turn them into a chorus, what I did is I had them record multiple takes of each part, and then I would go in and offset them to kind of add to the aleatory and create a choir. And then I had one of the takes that was unprocessed, and then another that was offset and processed with reverb. And then I used this tape cassette emulation plugin called Sketch Cassette to kind of give it this like affected feel, where it's like this more turbulent, like where it was like cutting out, because in each of the 3 maze sections, it's kind of like you're coming out of focus and then into focus. So it's like you're turning the lens on the camera and it's all coming into focus. There we go. Here we go.
What is happening here?
Right now, what I'm doing, well, I'm just setting it up so I can actually play it, quickly setting it up so I can actually play it for you. Open up the Zoom on your device. So what I did is I created a click track based off of what I did is I notated out all of the Aerotoric parts, and then I would created a click track for that. So what I did is so like at every point where like a cell would change, I gave them 4 clicks ahead of time so that there was something to differentiate. They could cue themselves, okay, this is where the change is going to take place. And the interesting thing about this part was that I came up with the text for this part, and all I had them do was just variations of the word lost, because every time the maze is speaking, it's this feeling, it's like this thing is, they're like saying like to Icarus, like, oh, you are lost and you don't know where you're going, you're never going to be able to find your way out of the maze. So yeah. So one of the challenges in deciding to do this Aerotoric section with all the instrumentalists playing the role of the maze is that on top of all that, the performance that's going to happen at the end of June is completely unconducted. So in addition to all of that, I'm gonna write a percussion part using MIDI so that way there's like a pulse in there so that they're able to line up, because otherwise like no one will be able to line up without having someone like visually conduct them. So the main yeah, so I took the first one and then I slid it over so it didn't get the offset, and so this is the plugin I was talking about, and I had a preset that would kind of create like kind of like some of like the saturation and the warbling that you might get when you play like a cassette tape, as a way of kind of like adding to this fogginess that with the electronics.
So, Drew, question:
Yeah.
Are these electronics going to be playing, and then the maze is doing aleatoric stuff on top of it? Is that how it works?
No, what it is all the electronics are the aleatoric parts, and then they're delivering like the recitative above it. So they're like narrating. So what I did is, one of the other things I did is I opted to have double all of the maids. One of the instrumentalists is actually going to play all their parts, so that way they have something to follow with all the pitches. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're not able to show us to play that as the background since you have the MIDI of the
Yeah,
singers
well,
and instrumentalists going on. It's kind of hard
yeah.
to
So what I did is
demonstrate that.
what I did is I bounced out audio of those other parts so that I had all of it there for this one.
Right.
Then let me go. Nope, maybe this won't work. So this is one of the other segments of electronics.
Lost.
Sorry about that. I have no idea what's going on with the computer. Well, I guess that's not going to work right now. So I'm going to pull up what the notation of what they were looking at. Last couple minutes. So yeah. Yeah, so for that section, okay, so for that section, yeah, so for that section, I just did it with the cells where you have the box. So the cells, and then I wrote how long I wanted each thing to go and happen. One of the other things throughout this that I had to do is I actually had to create a piano vocal score in anticipation of the music workshop, which is actually happening next weekend. So next weekend, so you have so you have, and then see over top of it you have, I can then the maze. Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, during the performance, will the electronics be going all the time or intermittently?
It'll be happening all the time during these sections that are entitled like the maze beckons, or the maze 1, 2, and the maze and traps. So
Particular sections.
So it's in particular sections. So I have one segment, I have one set of electronics that happened in this first section and another that happened in the second section. And then what I'm planning to do is combine both of them. So in the first section, it's all just Aerotoric speaking. In the second section, it's Aerotoric singing, and then it'll all combine because it's the maze and trap. So it's supposed to be this very overwhelming feeling.
Sounds like a very cool idea. I hope I get to hear the whole thing when it's all put together.
Yeah, I will definitely share more information as I know it about performances and when people can hear it.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Cool. I guess I get it. Yeah, I mean, I guess not to put Brian on the spot, but if there's anything they would like to say about our collaboration, they're more than welcome to share if they would like.
Hi. I do not have anything prepared, but I do want to say that working with Drew has been a really distinct delight for me. It's actually my first time working with a composer in this way. I've never worked on an opera at all. It was kind of the Creation Labs sort of designed to rope in people from other fields. So I'm traditionally a playwright. And this is my first time writing a libretto, and Drew and I really created the ideas together throughout the writing process, and I've been able to sit back a little bit as Drew's been doing all of the composing. But very, very excited to see how
and it's very exciting to be able to actually hear it all together in person, which is one of the cool things. It's like once everything shifted to the virtual format, I was like, are we gonna actually be able to have all the musicians in the room, or am I gonna have to work around that? And the answer to that was no. It's just we have to adapt to increased COVID protocols before we all meet in person.
So you'll get to that's happening soon in person?
Yeah, we have our workshop this coming Sunday.
That's exciting.
Yes, I'm very excited to be able to hear it all. It'll be with a pianist instead of all the other instrumentalists. So hence the reason why I had to create the piano vocal score.
Right, for the first, and then a performance is later in the summer, you said?
Yeah, it'll be at the end of June.
And are you based in Seattle, Brian, or are you from some other part of the country? Are you here in Oregon?
I'm based in Seattle.
Yeah, all the participants in the Seattle Opera Creation Lab are based in Washington, and we're under the age of 30.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations to both of you for working on this and for not very long time frame. Right?
Yeah, this was this was certainly one of the fastest and largest projects I've worked on, because I worked on something about this scale for choir and percussion, and it took me about a year and a year and a quarter to write that piece as my master's thesis. So having to go everything is just there, and it was also a unique challenge because I've done a lot of choosing of the texts myself. So it's a refreshing process to collaborate with someone who just wrote a text and I didn't know what they were going to write and have to sit with it and be like, okay, and figure out the prosody with it. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you two been able to meet in person yet, or has it all been?
It's all over. It's been entirely over Zoom.
Really?
But this next weekend will be the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I know. It'll be so.
Both the music and Drew. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm just excited I'm also excited to just hear someone else sing it, because as part of my process, like I've been singing everything, and then I've been like recording it as all as voice memos to my phone and then transcribing it. So it'll be really cool to actually hear, other people sing it where they actually fit the voice types that I was writing for. Yeah, let's see. If no one has any more questions, I think I'd like to turn it over to Elizabeth.
Hey, well, I want to say thanks to Drew for their really exciting presentation, and I really look forward to hearing this. And Drew, I think we could perhaps promote something on our website. If you send us information, we
Yes, once
always
I
like
know,
to do that.
Yes, once I know more about performance recording, because that piece hasn't been kind of made clear if there's some live stream performance component or if they're just doing a recording. So, but I will definitely share what I can when I'm able to.
Excellent.
Drew, this is an amazing undertaking.
Yeah.
It's way beyond my expertise and just done a little bit of electronics, but this is what streamlined to the tiniest micro detail. It's just amazing.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks to Brian too.
Yes, thank you so much for being able to be here, Brian.
No, yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you, Drew, for giving the presentation.
Yeah.
All right, well, we should turn it over now to Elizabeth for a presentation about a piece for Bravo Youth Orchestra.
No, this isn't. This is for the In Good Hands project.
Oh, my apologies.
I have written.
You caught me.
Bravo Youth
I'm
Orchestra,
reading
but
off of Liz's email.
Oh dear.
My email?
I have written for the Bravo Youth Orchestra, but that's not what I'm talking about tonight.
Right.
I'm talking about a piece for unaccompanied cello, 3 pieces for unaccompanied cello.
Okay. Okay.
Elizabeth, we still have a feedback.
Oh dear. I'm not sure what I can do.
Well, I think it's only if one of us speaks. Is that right, Ted? Is that?
I think that, Elizabeth, maybe it might work if you stay on mute except when you're speaking.
Yes, but I'm going to be speaking a lot right now.
Okay, well, we'll all just listen then.
Yes, if we're all on mute.
Okay, and I will be playing my cello too a little bit, so I hope that comes through. So, I want to talk about a set of pieces that I wrote for unaccompanied cello that was written for the In Good Hands program that's coming up this summer. Are you getting feedback now, or is that better? Is it okay? Okay. I haven't written much for solo cello, even though it's my own instrument, because 2 reasons. One is that I really like writing counterpoint. And so that means I'm either writing for keyboard or I'm writing for multiple instruments. And the other is Bach, because Bach wrote the definitive pieces, the 6 cello suites. And I feel it's very hard to write anything after he did that. But back in October, Jan Middlestadt contacted me about writing a piece for one of Diane Chaplin's cello students for the In Good Hands concert sponsored by Cascadia Composers. And it sounded like fun. So I had a Zoom meeting with Diane and her student. Her student is named Elise, and she is a 12-year-old hotshot. She likes to play fast and she likes to play high. So I thought it would be fun to write a piece for Elise. And so I wrote a piece that had elements of tango in it, but it wasn't exactly a tango. And that was finished in December, and I thought, okay, I'm done. But then in February, Jan contacted me again and said, there's another student who wants a cello piece. And so I ended up writing a second cello piece for a student named Sophie, who's a student of Eric Alterman. And she is just graduated from high school, is taking a year off before she starts college just because of COVID. So I had a Zoom meeting with her, and we talked about what she would like to do. And she's been studying Elgar's cello concerto, and she wanted something that was sort of in that mood. And so I wrote for her a piece that was a slow movement. So at this point I thought, well, I think I'll write a set of 3 pieces because I have a fast piece already, and then I'll write a slow movement, and then I'll write a fast movement for the end. So I wrote her a slow movement. It's andante it's an ABA form, andante for A and A prime, and the middle is a waltz, which is faster. And I sent that to her, and after a few weeks of playing it, she decided that she wanted something with more technical challenges in it. And she said, can you write more technical challenges into the piece? And I said, no, I can't really do that, but I could write another piece because I want to write a set of 3 pieces. So I went ahead and I wrote a third piece that I call Dancing Between the Raindrops. And that one has a lot of technical challenges in it. And I want to talk about some of the cello techniques that I used in writing these pieces. So I brought my cello with me. So I wanted to keep up the interest in a piece that has only one instrument, but I also wanted to make it playable. So one of the things I want to do is utilize the full range of pitches of the cello. The open C string is 2 octaves below middle C. That's the lowest note you can play on the cello. But the highest notes you can play. You can play really high notes, and the timbre is really different. And if you play on the C string, you can play and have it sound almost like a string bass. But if you play on the A string, it sounds more like a violin or a viola. So there's a lot you can do with just different ranges of the instrument. And if you want to go even higher than the A string, you can play harmonics. So if you touch a string halfway across, you get an octave higher. If you touch it 2/3 of the way, you get an octave plus a fifth. You get 2 octaves, and you can go on. And so I wanted to make a little melody that could be played on the 2nd and 3rd harmonics. That's not my melody, but I used those harmonics to make a melody, and then I used that same melody in lower ranges later in the piece and also at the beginning of the piece. Another thing you can do to add differences is use pizzicato. And what else? Maybe you can do things like sul ponticello, which is playing right next to the bridge. I didn't do that. You can hit the strings with the bow. I didn't do that either. But I used a lot of the techniques that Bach used in his cello suite. And One of these is arpeggiated chords. So you can, it's hard, it's, you can play just 3. So cross string arpeggios, the notes have to be a 5th or a 6th apart usually, because you can't, the strings are tuned in 5ths and you can't make it like you would on a piano, just, you can't have closed triads, you have to have open chords. And what else? You can do double stops, you can play. Or you can leave one string open and play. And you can play compound melodies. So one string has one melody, another one has another melody. So that's another thing that Bach did a lot in his cello suites. You can play chords, they're not going to sound like every note is played at the same time, they're usually going to be rolled. You can also play chords pizzicato, you can strum them. Or you can hit them with your hand. So there are possibilities for chords too. Another technique is what's called barriolage. It's a rapid alternation between 2 strings, and I don't do this very well, but anyway, you sort of get the idea. Usually one string is a drone and the other string has changing fingerings on it. So I used all of these techniques in these pieces. And because I was writing for students, I decided to write tonal pieces. They're easier to play in tune, and it's easier for the student to understand what's going on. And I wanted to use natural harmonics as I demonstrated, and so the first piece I wrote was in D minor, because the natural harmonics work in D and A, major and minor, but they're kind of limited. I also wanted to be able to use the lowest pitches on the cello, and D is one of the lowest pitches on the cello. And the relative major F, the C, which is the lowest pitch on the cello, is the dominant of F. And so I used it a lot as a pizzicato, sort of percussive, rhythmic accent. Okay, I think that's all I want to demonstrate on the cello now. So next I want to play my pieces for you. The first one is called For Elise, and let's see if I can do screen sharing. And I also have here's the score. So I hope the sound is going to work okay. I'm going to try not to talk while I'm playing because that messes things up. Well, I hope you could hear that. Okay. The sound was good?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. So the second movement is called Reverie, and it's in E minor, like Elgar's cello concerto. It's not otherwise very much like it, except the mood is kind of sad, and I tried to give it a romantic flavor by including lots of diminished seventh arpeggios and going to a distant key. It's in E minor, and I went to E flat in the middle of the waltz, which is the center section of the piece. So I'm going to go ahead and play that now. And does anybody have questions at this point? If you have questions, unmute yourself and ask me. I'll wait.
One of the questions I have is when I'm writing for cello, I'm kind of confused about when to put in clef changes.
Um,
And
Usually if there get to be more than 3 ledger lines, then you want to have a clef change. That's sort of my rule of thumb. If there's only one note that's above the 3rd ledger line, then I don't
Okay.
bother to change. But if it's above the 3rd ledger line for several notes, then I go to tenor clef. Cellists don't like to read treble clef unless it's really high. It's better to go to tenor clef, and then if it keeps on going higher, then go to treble clef.
okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, then I will play Reverie, which is not always a waltz.
I can't see. What's that?
Okay, so that's Reverie. And I'm happy to answer any questions before I go on and play the last one, which is Dancing in Between the Raindrops. Dancing Between the Raindrops is, I think, fun to play. It has it's based on a tarantella. I call it not really a tarantella because it has a lot of duplets. A tarantella would normally be in like a 6/8 time, a compound meter. And this, I put it in 4/4 time, and I move between triplets and duplets. So it's kind of sometimes like a tarantella, but not always like a tarantella. Okay, well, this is the last one, so here we go. So that's all, folks.
Thank you.
And I welcome any questions about writing for the cello or about these pieces or about In Good Hands. I might be able to even talk about that.
This last one looks like it's really fun.
I think it's really fun. I can just barely play it. I didn't quite have enough time to learn it, but I made it through. These are all me playing.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for listening to me. It was fun to do this.
It was great.
Thank you.
Great. Fantastic.
Any questions? No?
With harmonics, like the last note on the second movement was like a harmonic E, I think, above
Yes.
middle C. So like when you, I mean, that's what I usually indicate it as well. Are there
You
more than
indicate-
one way?
You indicate where you touch it. I mean, there's a way to indicate. You can also, so in the passage that's written in harmonics,
Right. And these days it's more like
indicated
at pitch,
what
no?
it sounded like and also where to touch.
But here, in this case, you have.
It's a really common one. It's E. You just touch E and what comes out is what it is. But it comes out an octave E.
Right. Okay. That's a natural.
It's a natural. I didn't use any artificial harmonics in this piece. Just natural harmonics.
Those double stops is the piece that is in front. It looks like a D and an E above middle C. How would you finger that?
Which piece?
The one that's on Elise that you just had up. Yeah.
Okay.
And the second to the last one, those double stops that are really spread apart. The second.
Oh, okay. That's an open D.
Open D and
an E and an F, and then I play a fifth. No, that's not a fifth. Then I finger it's a seventh. You can finger a seventh with one on the low string and four on the high string.
But the D and the E, is that arpeggiated or?
No, they're played together. They were supposed to be anyway. I might have slipped. It's hard sometimes.
Oh, I
to get
see. On the D
to play at the
string
same
and the
time.
E. I get it.
The D is open to E and the E is fingered on the A string.
Yeah, I get it now.
And then in the next measure, they're both fingered. They're a seventh apart. You can do that with.
Elise, but I have to go.
Oh,
Excuse
well,
me.
thank you for coming.
Oh, I love it.
I'm glad you could be here.
Very nice, really.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to sign off also.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna stop screen sharing, and I guess I'll just say good night to everybody and thank you for all coming.
again.
And thank you, Drew, for your presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you, Drew and Brian and Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
Brian,
both.
too.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks to Drew and Elizabeth for presenting and everyone for attending. And we'll have a recording of this up probably in the next day or two.
Thank you, Ted.
Bye.
All right.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.